All right, let's talk about a huge showdown that just happened between the Supreme Court and the White House. It's all about tariffs, and trust me, the outcome of this fight is going to hit you right in the wallet.
You know when you're online shopping, maybe you just grabbed a new pair of headphones, or you're eyeing a new phone or jacket. Well, baked into that price tag is something called a tariff. And here's the kicker. The Supreme Court just ruled that a massive chunk of those tariffs, yeah, they were actually illegal.
So, what in the world does this all mean for your money? To really get to the bottom of it, we've got to start with the basics.
Okay, so what is a tariff? Super simple. It's a tax on stuff that's imported into the country. The best way to think about it? It's like a cover charge at a club. In this case, the club is the US market. If a company from another country wants to sell its products here, it's got to pay that cover charge. And you guessed it, just like a real club, that cost usually gets passed right along to you.
And that brings us to the main event. Last week, the Supreme Court took a long, hard look at a whole bunch of these so-called cover charges, tariffs that were put in place using a special emergency law. Their conclusion was, well, it was pretty blunt. They were illegal.
Okay, let's dig into the details of this decision, because why they ruled this way is actually a really, really big deal. It was a 6-3 decision, and the reasoning was surprisingly straightforward. They looked at the emergency law that was used to put these tariffs in place. It's called EPA. And they basically said, wait a minute, this law makes zero mention of tariffs or duties. So in a nutshell, Congress never gave the president the authority to use this specific law to create these taxes. And let's be super clear here. This ruling wasn't about whether tariffs are good or bad for the economy. Nope. This was a classic checks and balances thing, a separation of powers issue. The Constitution is pretty clear that Congress is the one in charge of trade and taxes, and the court found that the president couldn't just use an unrelated emergency law as a workaround.
And the scale of this, wow. We are talking about $175 billion. That is how much money had already been collected from these tariffs that are now officially illegal. I mean, that is just a staggering amount of cash.
So naturally, that leads to the $175 billion question, right? What happens to all that money? Do companies get a refund? Do you? Well, the short answer is, it's complicated. The big companies that actually filed lawsuits, they might see some of that money again. But for everybody else, it is going to be a long, messy legal slog.
Now, it's really tempting to hear this and think, great, the tariff era is over. But hold on. That is definitely not the case. It's super important to understand which tariffs were not affected by this ruling at all.
You've kind of got a tale of two tariffs here, based on two totally different laws. The ones that got struck down, they were based on that Emergency Powers Act, i.e. EPA, which is meant for responding to, unusual foreign threats. But there's a whole separate set of tariffs still on the books. These are known as Section 232 tariffs. They're based on a completely different law, one that's all about protecting industries that are seen as crucial for national security.
So what kind of stuff are we talking about with these tariffs that are still standing? Think big industries, steel, aluminum, and automobiles. If you work in or buy from those sectors, heads up, those tariffs are still very much in play. The Supreme Court's decision didn't touch them.
And just when you think you've got it all figured out, here comes the plot twist. The story does not end there. In direct response to the ruling, a brand new 10% global tariff was immediately announced, using a different legal authority. So the tariff fight, it is not over. Not by a long shot. The battlefield just shifted, and you can bet the lawyers are already gearing up for the next round.
Okay, so let's zoom out a bit. We need to connect all this legal drama to the bigger economic picture, because none of this is happening in a vacuum. It's all happening in a very specific economic environment.
Right now, the U.S. economy is it's in a strange spot. The latest numbers show GDP growth at just 1.4%, which, on the surface, seems pretty sluggish. But there's a story hidden inside that number. A recent government shutdown temporarily cut federal spending, which dragged the whole number down. If you actually strip that out and just look at the private economy, that's you, me, and businesses, it was growing at a much healthier 2.7%. At the same exact time, we've got the other piece of the puzzle, inflation. It's still sitting at 3%. Now look, that's way better than it was, but it's still a full percentage point higher than the Federal Reserve's target of 2%.
So this puts the Federal Reserve in a really tough spot, doesn't it? You've got a slowing economy on one hand and this stubbornly sticky inflation on the other. So what's their next move?
Think of the Fed as the economy's thermostat. Their main tool is interest rates. And when they crank those rates up, things like your car loan, your credit card debt, and a future mortgage all get more expensive.
They really can't cut rates to give the economy a boost until they're confident inflation is back in its box. And this is where it all connects, because tariffs, by definition, make goods more expensive. They are inherently inflationary. So with all these moving parts, a Supreme Court ruling, brand new tariffs, this economic uncertainty, what should we be looking out for next?
I mean, just look at this timeline. It shows you how fast this is all unfolding. February 21st, the Supreme Court strikes down the old tariffs. The very next day, a new 10% global tariff gets announced. It's whiplash. And you can be absolutely sure that new legal challenges are already being cooked up. This whole fight has just entered a brand new chapter.
All right, so let's boil this all down. What are the key takeaways? First, you might actually see prices on some imported stuff ease up a bit as companies adjust. Second, the tariff era is far from over. The legal battle has just shifted arenas. And third, all of this just adds up to one thing. Economic uncertainty is going to be the name of the game for the foreseeable future.
This ruling was a huge moment, no doubt about it. But it wasn't the final chapter. It was the opening scene of a brand new, and maybe even more complex, trade battle. The whole landscape is shifting under our feet, and it's happening fast. The only real question left is, are you ready for what comes next?